In the crucible of the American Civil War, amidst the grim, suffocating confines of a Virginia prison in 1862, a desperate plan took root. One born from the agony of captivity and the flickering hope of freedom. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, fear and hopelessness, as men clung to life behind rotting wooden fences. Here survival was a daily struggle, a fragile state measured in meagre rations, the gnawing ache of hunger and the ever-present shadow of despair. Each sunrise brought with it the question, would this be the day hope finally died? Captain Cyrus, a man whose sharp intellect was matched only by his unwavering resolve, watched the sky with haunted eyes. He saw his chance not in a tunnel dug in secret, nor in a desperate assault on the prison walls, but in the sky itself, a realm untouched by war, where dreams might yet take flight. A great observation balloon, a silken leviathan tethered near the encampment, became the focus of his daring vision. Its billowing form seemed to taunt the prisoners, a symbol of both the war's reach and the tantalizing possibility of escape. It was a vessel of war, yet for Cyrus and his weary compatriots it represented the singular promise of freedom, a fragile hope floating against a canvas of conflict. Each glance at the balloon was a silent prayer, a yearning for deliverance. The execution of this plan required a delicate dance of deception and raw courage. In the shadows, men whispered, their voices trembling with anticipation and dread. Every furtive glance, every coded gesture carried the weight of life and death. A sympathetic reporter, a man whose words usually chronicled the war's grim theatre, became an unlikely accomplice in this personal drama. His eyes, once detached and observant, now flickered with the same desperate hope as the prisoners he aided. He feigned the capture of Cyrus and his men, leading them under false pretenses directly towards their soaring arc of escape. Each step towards the balloon was a heartbeat louder, a silent drum of mounting suspense. The air was thick with tension, every breath a gamble against discovery. Cyrus's mind raced. What if a guard noticed the trembling hands, the too eager pace? What if the ruse unravelled now, at the very threshold of freedom? As they scrambled for the basket, the carefully constructed ruse shattered. Shouts erupted, boots pounded the earth, and the fragile illusion of control dissolved into chaos. The crack of a rifle shot split the night. The reporter, their key to freedom, fell, his sacrifice a sudden, brutal punctuation to their desperate bid. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze, grief and terror mingling in the cold air. In the ensuing chaos, a Union sergeant lunged to stop them, only to be hauled aboard, an unwilling passenger, his face a mask of shock and fury as the balloon lurched skyward. With the ground falling away and the shouts of their former captors fading into a distant murmur, a new conflict ignited within the cramped confines of the balloon's basket. The men pressed shoulder to shoulder, hearts pounding, eyes darting between the shrinking earth and the stranger among them. Nips, his heart raw with grief and fury over the reporter's sacrifice, felt rage boiling within him. In his mind the sergeant was the embodiment of every injustice, every loss. He clenched his fists, his thoughts a storm. He doesn't deserve to live, not after what we've lost. He moved to cast the sergeant into the abyss below, a swift, brutal act of wartime justice. The others recoiled, torn between vengeance and the horror of murder in midair. Yet it was Captain Cyrus who intervened, his voice cutting through the turmoil. "Enough!" he commanded, his words heavy with authority and pain. In that moment his leadership transcended the hatreds of the war. He insisted the sergeant be spared, arguing that they were no longer soldiers defined by the uniforms they wore, but simply survivors, bound together by the shared peril of their ascent into the unknown. The men fell silent, the truth of his words settling over them like a shroud. Their vessel, now a tiny speck against the vast expanse of the heavens, drifted on the unpredictable currents of the wind. The world below shrank, the war's fury reduced to a distant memory. Below them, the war-torn landscape of Virginia became a patchwork of greens and browns, the great conflict shrinking to an abstraction. For the first time in years, the men felt the weight of their chains begin to lift. They had done the impossible. They had slipped the bonds of their captivity and cheated the war that had consumed their lives. Relief mingled with disbelief. Was this truly freedom or merely another illusion? But as they floated higher, leaving one world behind, they were entirely at the mercy of the elements. The wind howled, the basket creaked, and the vastness of the sky pressed in on them, both liberating and terrifying. They were pioneers of a new, unwritten chapter, hearts pounding, minds racing with questions and fears. Unaware, they drifted not just across a continent, but across the very fabric of time itself, towards a destiny far stranger than any they could have possibly imagined. The initial euphoria of their escape soon gave way to a profound sense of vulnerability. The explorers clung to the sides of the basket, their knuckles white, as the world below faded into a blur of uncertainty. The sky, their liberator, began to show a more menacing face. Shadows crept across the horizon, swallowing the last rays of sunlight. Dark, bruised clouds gathered on the horizon, coalescing with an unnatural speed into a storm of immense and terrifying power. The air thickened, charged with a static that made the hair on their arms stand on end. The wind, once a gentle guide, became a furious tormentor, whipping the balloon mercilessly and tossing the basket about like a child's toy. The explorers shouted over the roar, their voices barely audible. Rain lashed down in blinding sheets, and the thunder was not a distant rumble, but a deafening, visceral crack that seemed to split the very air around them. Lightning forked dangerously close, illuminating faces twisted in fear. This was no ordinary storm. It possessed a malevolent intelligence, a focused fury that seemed to be drawing them towards its dark heart. The balloon creaked and groaned, ropes straining under the relentless assault. As they were pulled deeper into the tempest, the world dissolved into a maelstrom of violent chaos. The explorers exchanged frantic glances, each silently questioning if this was the end. It was then that they saw it, a phenomenon that defied all logic and experience. Shouting, "What is that?" one of the men cried, pointing with a trembling hand at the sky ahead. A rift appeared in the churning clouds ahead, a swirling vortex of blackness that seemed to pull the light and sound from the world. The air vibrated with a low, unearthly hum. It was a hole in the sky, a gaping wound in the fabric of reality. The explorers stared, transfixed, as the impossible unfolded before them. The balloon, utterly powerless against the storm's incredible force, was dragged inexorably towards this anomaly. Voice trembling. "Hold on, for God's sake, hold on!" another shouted, gripping the basket as the wind howled. Fear, cold and absolute, gripped the hearts of the men as they were pulled into the tempest's maw, their cries swallowed by the roar of the wind and the impossible spectacle before them. The sensation was overwhelming, ears ringing, skin stinging, vision blurring as the world spun out of control. The journey through the portal was a sensory nightmare, a disorienting plunge into a realm beyond human comprehension. Colours bled and twisted, time seemed to fracture, time itself seemed to stretch and compress, and strange, fleeting images flashed before their eyes, glimpses of worlds and moments that were not their own. Whispering, awestruck, "Did you see that? Was that us?" The laws of nature were suspended in this terrifying passage. Objects floated, gravity shifted, and the explorers felt themselves stretched thin, as if their very souls were being pulled apart. They were adrift in a void, tumbling through a corridor between moments, their fragile vessel a mere speck of matter caught in a cosmic current. Voice breaking. "Where are we? What's happening to us?" The experience was indescribable, a violent severing from everything they had ever known, as they were hurled from their own time and place into an uncertain and terrifying future. The confusion was total. Memories flickered, senses rebelled, and the only constant was the relentless motion. Just as suddenly as it had begun, their violent transit ended. The world snapped back into focus, and the storm's fury was replaced by an eerie, unnatural calm. They were spat out of the portal, not into the familiar sky of 19th century America, but into the turbulent air of a different world. The explorers gasped, blinking in disbelief at the alien landscape below. The balloon, torn and battered by its impossible journey, began a rapid, uncontrolled descent. The basket lurched, and the explorers braced for impact. Below them, through breaks in the clouds, they saw not the rolling fields of the continent, but the shores of a strange, verdant island, its coastline pounded by a ferocious surf. Shouting, "Brace yourselves, we're going down!" Their escape had concluded in a final, brutal crash, as the remnants of their balloon snagged on towering, unfamiliar trees, spilling them onto the sands of a land lost to time. The explorers lay stunned, the storm's echoes fading, as they realized they had crossed not just miles, but centuries. The survivors awoke slowly, their bodies aching and their minds clouded with the surreal memory of their passage. As the first rays of sunlight crept across the sand, they blinked against the dazzling gold, the grains sparkling like flecks of some ancient treasure. The air was thick with the scent of salt and something sweetly unfamiliar, a perfume that seemed to drift from the jungle itself. They were scattered across a beach of strangely golden sand, the wreckage of their balloon hanging like a tattered ghost in the dense canopy of the jungle that met the shore. Around them the debris of their journey mingled with bizarre spiral shells and driftwood bleached bone-white by the sun. The air was thick and humid, heavy with the scent of unknown blossoms and the damp decay of the forest floor. Strange insects, their shells glinting with impossible colours, darted between enormous waxy leaves. Vines hung like emerald serpents, and flowers the size of dinner plates unfurled in the mist, their petals trembling with the movement of hidden creatures. A profound and unnerving silence hung over the island, broken only by the rhythmic crash of waves and the cries of unfamiliar birds. Their calls were haunting, some melodic, others guttural and strange, echoing through the trees and making the survivors shiver with both awe and unease. It was a place of wild primeval beauty, but one that radiated an immediate and palpable sense of menace. The jungle seemed to breathe, its shadows alive with secrets, and every step forward felt like trespassing in a world untouched by time. A chilling realization soon dawned upon the small, disoriented group. Captain Cyrus, their leader and the architect of their escape, was gone. Panic flickered in their eyes as they called his name, voices swallowed by the vastness of the island. A frantic search of the immediate crash site yielded no trace of him, as if he had been swallowed by the jungle or the sea itself. The sand bore only fleeting footprints, quickly erased by the wind and tide. In the vacuum of his absence, a new, tense leadership dynamic emerged. The group's voices grew sharper, their movements more guarded, as uncertainty gnawed at their resolve. Nips, still fueled by a raw and aggressive pragmatism, was nominated by the men to lead, his decisive nature seen as a necessary asset in this hostile new world. He accepted with a grim nod, his eyes scanning the jungle as if daring it to challenge him. The Union sergeant, a man of discipline and order, found himself an outsider, his authority and experience rendered meaningless in this strange and lawless land. He watched the others with a mixture of resentment and fear, his training clashing with the wild unpredictability of their new reality. The island did not wait long to reveal its dangers. Tracks in the mud hinted at creatures both familiar and utterly alien, three-toed prints, deep claw marks, and feathers that shimmered with unnatural hues. As the men ventured cautiously into the fringe of the jungle, seeking shelter and fresh water, the first tragedy struck. The undergrowth pressed close, alive with the rustle of unseen life, and every step was a leap into the unknown. One of their number, a young soldier named Tom, let out a sudden terrified cry. His voice echoed through the trees, sharp with primal fear. He was dragged away into the dense undergrowth with terrifying speed by a creature they never saw, his screams abruptly silenced. The jungle swallowed him whole, leaving only a shuddering silence in his wake. The attack was a brutal confirmation of their deepest fears. They were not alone, and they were most certainly not at the top of the food chain. The jungle's beauty now seemed a cruel mask for its lurking horrors. The unseen predator left behind only a trail of disturbed foliage and a profound, lingering terror that infected the entire group. Every breath felt heavy, every sound a threat. This harrowing encounter forced the survivors into a state of high alert. They moved as one, backs pressed together, senses straining for any sign of danger. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow that danced at the edge of their vision became a potential threat. The jungle seemed to watch them, its secrets hidden just out of sight. The jungle, once a source of potential resources, was now a wall of fear, a living labyrinth teeming with hidden killers. The survivors felt the weight of its ancient presence pressing in on all sides. They were stranded, leaderless, and hunted. The enormity of their predicament settled over them like a shroud, each heartbeat echoing with dread and wonder. Their escape from a human war had delivered them into a far more ancient and terrifying conflict, a primal struggle for survival against the monstrous inhabitants of this mysterious lost island. Yet, even as fear gripped their hearts, a sense of awe lingered. They stood on the threshold of a world forgotten by time, where every step promised both danger and discovery, and the wonders of the lost world beckoned just beyond the shadows. Days blurred into a relentless cycle of survival, each moment a battle against hunger, exhaustion, and the ever-present threat lurking in the oppressive jungle. On a tense scouting mission, the sergeant, driven by discipline and desperation, found himself separated from the others, swallowed by the dense undergrowth. Venturing farther than anyone dared, he stumbled upon a vision so surreal, so out of place, it seemed to warp the very fabric of reality. In a clearing, carved from the heart of the ancient jungle, stood a house, immaculate, imposing, and utterly impossible. Its architecture was elegant, with sweeping lines and vast windows, hinting at a mastery of design and technology that belonged to another world. The house was pristine, untouched by the chaos outside, a beacon of civilization in a land ruled by wildness. When the others arrived, disbelief and hope warred on their faces. Was this salvation, or something far stranger? The house was not a ruin, but a home, lights glowing softly as if waiting for their return. Inside they found rooms furnished with modern comforts, plush chairs, polished tables, and art that seemed to shift in the changing light. A library lined the walls, shelves groaning with books on science, engineering, and subjects none of them had ever heard of. The kitchen was a marvel, gleaming appliances, a pantry filled with preserved foods in containers marked with strange symbols. It was a sanctuary, an oasis of order and comfort, but its perfection only deepened the sense of unreality. The survivors gathered, whispering theories. Was this a mirage, a trap, or a gift from some unknown benefactor? Who could have built such a place, hidden on a monster-haunted island lost to time? And more unsettling, where was the owner? Every room felt recently used, yet no one answered their calls. The house was immaculate, as if its caretaker had just stepped out, leaving behind a world frozen in anticipation. As they explored, they found subtle clues: a half-finished cup of tea, a book left open on a desk, footprints in the dust that led nowhere. The technology was baffling: sleek metal devices with blinking lights, screens that flickered to life at a touch, and tools whose purpose they could only guess. Light filled the rooms, but there were no lamps, no candles, just a soft, sourceless glow that seemed to come from the very walls. Every detail whispered of a time and knowledge far beyond their own, as if the house itself had slipped through the cracks of history. It was a relic, but not from the past, a fragment of a future that had no place in their world. Unease grew with every discovery. The house was not just a mystery, but a challenge to everything they believed possible. The survivors debated in hushed voices. Some believed it was a government experiment gone awry, others whispered of alien visitors, or time travellers marooned like themselves. The house offered shelter and food, but every comfort was laced with suspicion. Was it watching them? Was it safe? It stood as a silent monument to an intelligence that had tamed the wild, at least in this small, perfect corner. For the Civil War survivors, the house was both a haven and a source of profound disorientation, a riddle with no answer. They realized they were not just castaways, but intruders in a story that was not their own, trespassers in a place governed by rules they could not fathom. The ghost in the jungle was no phantom, but a solid, inexplicable building, a puzzle that deepened the island's enigma and left them wondering what other secrets waited in the shadows. The island's sky, a source of such terror during their own arrival, once again became a stage for a dramatic and world-altering event. Without warning, the air tore open, and another swirling vortex, identical to the one that had ensnared their balloon, appeared directly overhead. This time, however, what emerged was not a primitive airship of silk and wicker, but a sleek, metallic craft that screamed through the air at an incredible speed. The modern airplane, crippled by its passage through the portal, spiraled out of control, trailing smoke as it plummeted towards the island, crashing violently not far from the castaways' position. Rushing to the crash site, the 19th-century soldiers were met with a scene of chaos and wonder. Amidst the wreckage they found two survivors, a pair of young women, sisters named Julia and Abby. Even more astonishingly, they also found Captain Cyrus alive, but locked in a desperate battle against a pack of the island's strange, aggressive creatures. The reunion was a moment of profound relief, overshadowed by the bizarreness of the circumstances. Cyrus, their lost leader, had been returned to them at the very moment these new, strangely dressed people had appeared, as if delivered by the same twist of fate. The ensuing conversation between the two groups of survivors quickly unravelled their shared reality. A profound temporal discrepancy became immediately apparent. The Civil War group believed they had arrived on the island on March 5th, while the sisters, Julia and Abby, were adamant that the date was somewhere in August. The confusion deepened until Julia, a woman of sharp intellect and modern knowledge, delivered the stunning revelation. She explained that she and her sister were not from 1862, they were from the future, and their plane had been on a routine flight, when it was inexplicably pulled into the storm and through the portal. Julia's words reshaped their entire understanding of their predicament. She spoke of a future where the American Civil War was a distant historical event, won by the Union. She identified their location not as some uncharted landmass in the Pacific, but as the heart of the infamous Bermuda Triangle, a place of myth and legend in her own time. Suddenly, the strange creatures, the impossible house, and the temporal vortexes began to coalesce into a terrifying new picture. They were not merely lost in space, but hopelessly, incomprehensibly lost in time, prisoners on an island that sat at the crossroads of history. Julia and Abby, their faces streaked with tears, clung to each other, the weight of their new reality sinking in. The soldiers, bewildered and anxious, exchanged worried glances, their minds struggling to grasp the enormity of their situation. Captain Cyrus, ever the leader, rallied the group, his voice steady and determined, urging them to stay strong and united. Together they huddled, forming a plan to survive and find a way back to their respective times, their bond growing stronger in the face of the unknown. As the sun set over the island, a glimmer of hope emerged amidst the chaos, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the days following the arrival of the sisters, the survivors began to notice a pattern of benevolent intervention. Someone was watching over them. When Abby's leg, injured in the plane crash, became infected, a supply of modern medicine appeared mysteriously near their camp. The group exchanged bewildered glances, unsure whether to trust this miracle. Tools they needed would be left in plain sight. Each new discovery was met with a mix of relief and suspicion. Food would be found where none had been before. The survivors whispered among themselves, wondering if the island itself was alive. A silent, unseen benefactor was watching over them, providing for their needs and subtly guiding them towards survival. This mysterious helper, this ghost of the island, was a source of both gratitude and deep suspicion. Some feared a trap, others clung to hope. Their guardian angel remained hidden, their motives unknown, until the day fate forced a meeting. The identity of this enigmatic figure was revealed during a violent confrontation. While scavenging for supplies, Cyrus and Julia were ambushed by a band of savage pirates, another group of castaways spat out by the island's temporal storms. Just as they were about to be overwhelmed, a figure emerged from the jungle, moving with practiced efficiency and wielding a weapon that crackled with an otherworldly energy. He dispatched the pirates with ease, his movements precise and almost inhumanly calm. The survivors stared in awe and fear as he approached. As Cyrus, breathless, Who are you?" as Julia, voice trembling. "You saved us, why?" The man regarded them with a weary, knowing gaze. He spoke, his voice deep and resonant. "My name is Nemo, Captain Nemo." The name rippled through the group as the others gathered, disbelief and wonder mingling on their faces. As Abby, awestruck, "Captain Nemo, but that's impossible, you're a legend." Softly, "A legend, perhaps, but also a man, and like you, a prisoner of this island." Nemo led them back to his home, the impossible house in the jungle, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. There he unspooled the island's incredible history, his voice heavy with memory and regret. "I was once a scientist, obsessed with the mysteries of time. I built this house as a sanctuary, a laboratory, a beacon for lost souls. I am not the fictional submariner of legend, but I have spent my life at the edge of the possible, at the forefront of temporal research." As one of the survivors, voice cracking, "You've been here all this time, alone?" With a sad smile, 20 years, watching, waiting, hoping for a way to undo what I have done. My goal was to harness the geothermal energy of the island's underwater volcano to power a machine capable of creating controlled gateways through time. I wanted to unlock the secrets of the universe to become a master of history itself, but ambition has a price. This island, within the Bermuda Triangle's magnetic anomaly, was the only place on Earth where my experiment could succeed. But my grand design ended in catastrophe. During a critical phase, my underwater facility was attacked by a colossal octopus, drawn by the energy emissions. The attack caused a catastrophic overload in my time travel apparatus. Instead of a controlled gateway, I tore an unstable and permanent rift in the space-time continuum, the very portal that has dragged you and so many others to this island. Voice breaking. I became the first and most enduring captive of my own creation, a lonely monarch reigning over a kingdom of chaos. The group listened in stunned silence, the weight of Nemo's confession settling over them. Some felt pity, others awe, and a few a flicker of hope. For the first time the survivors saw not just a legend, but a man, flawed, brilliant, and as lost as they were. With the mystery of the island's origin solved, a new, more immediate terror gripped the survivors. Captain Nemo revealed a far more disturbing truth, his voice barely above a whisper as the group huddled together, every shadow outside the campfire flickering with menace. One that struck at the heart of the survivors' daily terror, and explained the relentless attacks that had haunted there every night. He explained the nature of the monstrous, vaguely humanoid creatures that stalked the jungle, creatures that had grown bolder, attacking in packs, testing the survivors' defences. The very beasts that had hunted them since their arrival now seemed to anticipate their every move, forcing the group to develop new strategies just to survive the night. These were not some native species that had evolved on the island over millennia, but something far more tragic and horrifying. They were, in fact, the tragic remnants of his own scientific crew, transformed beyond recognition. The men and women who had worked alongside him on his ambitious time travel project, now lost to the jungle's darkness. They, too, had been stranded with him for 2 decades, their fate a warning to all. Nemo elaborated on the horrifying process of their transformation, his words painting a picture of slow, inescapable doom. Exposed to the raw, unstable temporal energy leaking from the damaged machine, the crew's bodies and minds began to change. Forced to adapt to the harsh, primeval environment, the survivors fought not just for food and shelter, but for their very sanity. His crew had undergone a slow and terrible devolution, their humanity slipping away with each passing year. Over the years, their humanity had been stripped away, replaced by animalistic instincts and primal rage. Their bodies and minds warping to suit the savage demands of the island, the line between man and monster blurred beyond recognition. They had regressed into bestial predators, losing their language, their memories, and their very souls, becoming the nightmares that haunted the survivors every step. Now driven by base instinct, they stalked the jungle, always watching, always waiting. Hunting and killing to survive, the monsters forced the group to become ever more resourceful, setting traps, keeping watch in shifts, and never letting their guard down. A grotesque and tragic mockery of the brilliant scientists they once were, the monsters' attacks grew more cunning, as if some fragment of their old selves remained. This revelation cast a chilling new light on every encounter the survivors had endured. Every scream in the night, every desperate fight for survival. The creatures they had fought and fled from were not mere monsters. They were former people, their humanity flickering like a dying candle. Victims of the same catastrophe that had imprisoned Nemo, and a warning of what the survivors themselves might become. A failed escape attempt by the Union sergeant underscored this horrifying reality as desperation began to fracture the group's unity. Consumed by his own selfish desires, he risked everything for a chance at freedom, ignoring the warnings of his companions. He stole a small boat Nemo had hidden, hoping to slip away under cover of darkness. Attempting to flee the island alone, he paddled into the churning sea, unaware of the danger lurking beneath. He was swiftly intercepted and devoured by the giant octopus, its monstrous form rising from the depths in a frenzy of violence, the very same creature that had caused the initial disaster, its continued presence a constant, lethal reminder of the island's inescapable dangers. Its shadow loomed over every attempt at escape, sealing the survivors' fate. The survivors now understood the full scope of their predicament, the island closing in around them like a living nightmare. The island was not just a physical prison, but a crucible of transformation, a place where hope and humanity were tested to the breaking point, a place that actively worked to break down and remake those trapped within its influence, both physically and mentally. The devolved crew members were a terrifying vision of their own potential future, a constant reminder of what awaited them if they failed to escape. If they remained, they too might succumb to the island's corrupting power, their minds unravelling with each passing day. Losing themselves to the savagery required to survive, the group teetered on the edge of madness, haunted by the monsters outside and within. The need to escape became more than a desire for freedom. It was a desperate fight to preserve their own humanity, to resist the island's relentless assault on their minds and souls. It was a battle not just for survival, but for identity, a struggle to hold on to hope and memory against the encroaching tide of monstrosity. The island's greatest threat was not the monsters outside, but the darkness it awakened within. Just as the full, horrifying truth of their situation settled upon the survivors, the island delivered its final, cataclysmic ultimatum. The ground trembled with relentless, bone-rattling violence, each quake more severe than the last. A dark plume of smoke and ash billowed from the summit of the central volcano, the very source of the energy that powered Nemo's failed experiment. After decades of dormancy, the mountain was roaring back to life, its fury threatening to consume the entire island in a tide of fire and lava. Rivers of molten lava surged down the slopes, devouring everything in their path. The air filled with choking ash and the roar of destruction. Escape was no longer an option. It was an absolute and immediate necessity. With every route to safety blocked by fire, collapsed bridges and impassable jungle, the survivors faced a terrifying truth. The sky was their only hope. Their plan, a desperate echo of the very event that brought them to the island, was to build a new balloon. But this time the stakes were higher, the danger greater, and time was running out. The survivors sprang into action, every second precious. Exhausted, battered and terrified, they worked together with frantic determination, cutting, sewing and assembling the balloon as the earth shook beneath their feet. It was a monumental task, requiring ingenuity, courage and a race against the clock. They scavenged every usable scrap from the wreckage of the original balloon and the crashed airplane, patching together a new envelope from torn silk and modern fabrics. Tempers flared, hands bled, but no one gave up. The threat of the volcano drove them on, uniting them in a single, desperate purpose. For lift, Nemo offered his genius, revealing a small but powerful steam engine he had invented, a marvel of compact engineering that could, in theory, heat the air quickly enough for a rapid ascent. But there was a catch. The critical steam engine was not in Nemo's house. It was hidden in his old, abandoned laboratory, a series of caves now infested and claimed by the devolved crew members, monstrous remnants of his former team. Retrieving it meant venturing into the heart of their enemy's territory, a veritable lion's den. The group hesitated, fear and doubt gnawing at their resolve. But the urgency of their mission left no room for hesitation. Led by Cyrus and Nemo, a small armed party descended into the dark caves, the tremors of the awakening volcano shaking the very rock around them. Every step was a gamble, every shadow a threat. The caves became a battleground. What followed was a brutal, close-quarters fight against the creatures who were a dark mirror of themselves. The survivors fought with everything they had, sticks, stones, and Nemo's energy weapon, pushing forward through the labyrinthine tunnels. The desperate struggle was illuminated by flickering torchlight and the flash of Nemo's energy weapon. Teamwork became their only hope, each person covering the other, pulling the wounded, shouting warnings, refusing to leave anyone behind. Against all odds, they reached the laboratory and secured the precious steam engine, the key to their salvation. For a moment, hope surged through the group, but their victory came at a terrible cost. During the frantic retreat, Captain Nemo was gravely injured, his body broken in the fight to save the others. He knew he would not survive the journey. With his last reserves of strength, Nemo urged them to leave him behind, insisting their escape was all that mattered now. His sacrifice was the final tragic price of his own ambition. The survivors pressed on, carrying the engine and the memory of their fallen leader. The volcano's fury thundered behind them, but above the sky beckoned, a fragile promise of hope, unity and survival. The race to the sky was not just a fight for escape, but a testament to the power of courage and teamwork in the face of impossible odds. Carrying the heavy steam engine and the even heavier weight of Nemo's sacrifice, the survivors scrambled back to the beach. The volcano's fury was now unleashed, the sky black with ash and the air thick with the smell of sulphur. Rivers of molten lava began to snake down the mountainside, consuming the jungle and driving a terrifying exodus of the island's creatures toward the shore. In a frenzy of desperate activity, they attached the engine to their makeshift balloon basket and began to frantically inflate the patchwork envelope. The final confrontation was upon them as the devolved crew, driven from their caves, launched a last savage attack. The team fought them off, a small pocket of determined humanity battling against a tide of devolved monsters, all while the world around them was ending. As the balloon strained at its tethers, finally beginning to lift, the giant octopus, the ancient guardian and cause of the island's chaos, rose from the waves for one last assault. Its massive tentacles lashed out, threatening to drag them from the sky and into a watery grave. It was a scene of pure apocalyptic mayhem, a volcano erupting, monsters attacking, and the sea itself reaching up to claim them. In that critical moment, Captain Cyrus grabbed Nemo's current gun, the strange weapon left to them by the fallen scientist. Instead of firing at the beast, Cyrus, recalling Nemo's frantic final instructions, aimed the weapon at the sky. He fired a beam of concentrated energy directly into the turbulent, ash-filled atmosphere. The gun, designed to interact with the island's unique electromagnetic properties, generated a massive charge, supercharging the steam engine, and more importantly, providing the final jolt of energy needed to tear open the unstable time portal one last time. The swirling vortex appeared above them, a gateway out of their collapsing hell. The balloon surged upwards, pulled into the portal just as the island below was consumed by fire and water. Their escape was a final, chaotic plunge back into the unknown. They were once again adrift in the disorienting corridor between times, leaving the island of their torment behind forever. But as the chaos faded and the roar of destruction gave way to silence, a new uncertainty settled over the survivors. The horizon before them was no longer a place, but a question, an endless possibility, both hope and fear entwined. In the aftermath, as they drifted through the surreal tunnel of time, each survivor was left to confront the mysteries that remained. What world awaited them on the other side? Would they find home, or only another exile? The story, however, does not end with their arrival. It ends with a profound and lingering question that hangs in the silence after their escape. Did the portal, in its final unstable act, return the two groups of survivors to their respective timelines, the soldiers to the 19th century and the sisters to the 21st? Or did it deposit them all together into a single shared timeline, forever displaced from their own histories? Their fate remains an enigma, a final unresolved mystery whispered on the currents of time. And as they gazed out at the uncertain horizon, hope flickered alongside doubt. Would they find meaning in this new world, or would the past forever haunt their steps? Perhaps in the end, the greatest adventure is not the battle for survival, but the search for belonging in a universe that offers no guarantees. The horizon is always uncertain, and every ending is only the beginning of another story, one written in courage, loss, and the unbreakable will to seek the light beyond the storm. As the survivors drift through the swirling corridor of time, flashes of memory flicker in their minds, moments from the island that refuse to be left behind. Among them, one memory stands out, the strange symbols and cryptic carvings they found etched deep into the volcanic rock, half hidden by vines and time. At first the markings seemed like the ramblings of a lost civilization, spirals, arrows, and a language no one recognized. But desperation breeds curiosity, and curiosity fuels discovery. Huddled by flickering lantern light, the group worked together, piecing together fragments of meaning. The sisters' knowledge of ancient scripts, the soldiers' keen eyes for patterns, and Nemo's scattered notes all came together. With every symbol deciphered, the puzzle of the island's time anomalies began to unravel. The carvings were not merely warnings or rituals, they were instructions, a centuries-old code left by those who had come before. The group realized with awe and trepidation that the island itself was a gateway, a place where the boundaries of time had always been thin, but discovery is never without risk. As they unlocked each secret, the very air seemed to tremble, the island's pulse quickening as if it resented the intrusion. The ground shook, shadows flickered at the edge of vision, and the sense of being watched grew unbearable. The thrill of revelation was matched only by the dread of what they might unleash. Yet even as danger mounted, the survivors pressed on, driven not just by the need to escape, but by the exhilaration of shared purpose. In that crucible, alliances were forged, old wounds began to heal, and hope was kindled in the darkness. The cipher they unravelled did more than open a portal. It transformed them, binding their fates to the mysteries of the island and to each other. The legacy of the symbols would follow them, a reminder that the greatest secrets are not just hidden in stone, but in the courage it takes to face the unknown together. The time-worn jungle parts, revealing a sight that stops every heart, a city of stone and metal, half swallowed by the earth, yet humming with a dormant energy. Towering pillars gleam with inlaid crystal. Strange machines, their purpose lost to centuries, lie scattered among toppled statues and archways. The explorers move with reverence and caution, their lanterns casting trembling halos on walls etched with the same symbols they studied before. Every step deeper into the ruins uncovers marvels that defy logic, bridges that float without support, doors that dissolve at a touch, murals depicting men and women gazing up at the stars, their hands outstretched, their eyes filled with hope and warning. The cryptic carvings, once indecipherable, now pulse with meaning. Translations flicker in the survivors' minds. Beware the hunger of the void. Time is a river, but the dam will break. Our salvation is also our curse. Awe and dread mingle as the group realizes the truth. This civilization was far more advanced than their own. They had unlocked the secrets of time, but at a terrible cost. The warnings are clear. Meddling with the island's heart brought ruin. As the explorers piece together the final fragments, a chill settles over them. Are they destined to repeat history's mistakes, or can they learn from the echoes of this forgotten empire? The ruins stand as both a promise and a threat. Their future, and perhaps the fate of all who come after, will be shaped by what they choose to do next. In the silent grandeur of the lost city, the explorers find not just answers, but the weight of responsibility and the haunting realization that some mysteries are meant to endure. Beneath the shadow of ancient towers, the ground trembles. A low hum rises, swelling into a chorus of impossible notes, as a swirling portal materializes at the heart of the ruined city. Its surface ripples with memories, familiar faces, lost places, the promise of home. The explorers stand transfixed. This is the way back, but at what cost? A voice, neither living nor dead, echoes through the chamber. To go is to give. The passage demands a sacrifice. The group falters. Each member's eyes flicker with hope, fear, and the weight of choices yet unmade. Confessions spill forth in the charged silence. One dreams of reunion with family, but fears erasing the bonds forged in survival. Another clings to guilt over past mistakes, desperate for redemption. A third, changed by the wonders and horrors of this world, questions if returning means abandoning the lessons learned. Arguments flare. Should they risk everything for the chance to reclaim lost lives? Or honour the warnings etched in stone, accepting that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again? As the portal pulses, its pull grows stronger. The survivors must choose who or what will be left behind. The air crackles with tension as hands reach out, trembling on the edge of decision. In this final test of courage, the explorers face not just the unknown, but themselves. The choice they make will echo beyond the ruins, shaping destinies yet unwritten. And as one steps forward, heart-pounding, fate in hand, the portal flares blindingly bright, sealing their legacy in the island's timeless embrace.